Hello everyone and welcome back to Haunted Hues. I know many of you tune into these videos to help you drift off to sleep, but before you get cozy, I thought it would be fun to hear from all of you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from around the world. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's dive in. I had been looking forward to this weekend getaway for weeks. Spring was finally here, and I was ready to escape the daily grind of work and responsibilities. My friends and I had rented a stylish apartment in the city, a place that promised fun, laughter, and a little bit of adventure. The moment we stepped inside, I felt a wave of excitement wash over me. The place was beautiful, with high ceilings, large windows, and a cozy vibe that made it feel like home. But there was one thing that caught my eye immediately: the massive antique mirror hanging in the hallway. This mirror was something else. It was huge, almost taking up an entire wall. The frame was ornate, with intricate carvings that hinted at its age. It had a kind of charm that made it stand out, but there was something about it that felt off. The glass was slightly warped, distorting the reflections in a way that made everything look a little surreal. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a mirror. It felt alive, pulsing with some kind of energy that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As we settled in, Rachel, my friend who had always been fascinated by the supernatural, couldn't help but gravitate toward the mirror. She stood in front of it for what felt like forever, admiring her reflection and running her fingers along the frame. I watched her, feeling a mix of amusement and concern. It was just a mirror, right? But there was something about the way she stared at it that made me uneasy. The first night passed in a blur of laughter, drinks, and late-night snacks. We played games, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company. But every time I walked past that mirror, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, I was here to have fun, not to get spooked by a piece of furniture. The next day, we decided to explore the city. We hit up some local shops, grabbed lunch at a cute cafe, and took a ton of pictures. But no matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling of the mirror lurking in the back of my mind. It was like a shadow following me around, and I couldn't help but feel a little paranoid. I kept thinking about how it had seemed to pulse with energy when I first saw it. I tried to ignore it, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt like something was off. When we returned to the apartment that evening, Rachel was once again drawn to the mirror. This time, she stood in front of it, her expression a mix of awe and curiosity. I watched her, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I couldn't help but notice how the reflections in the mirror seemed to shimmer, almost like they were alive. I thought I saw shadows moving behind her, figures that shouldn't have been there. But when I blinked, they were gone. I shook my head, telling myself it was just the lighting playing tricks on my eyes. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. The laughter faded, and a sense of unease settled over us. We tried to shake it off, but it was hard to ignore. I caught Rachel glancing at the mirror every few minutes, her fascination turning into something more intense. I could see the excitement in her eyes, but I also sensed a hint of fear. It was like she was drawn to it, but at the same time, she was wary of what it might reveal. I decided to distract myself by joining the others in the living room, but I couldn't escape the feeling that the mirror was watching me, too. I kept stealing glances at it, half expecting to see something strange reflected back at me. And then it happened. I was walking past the mirror when I caught a glimpse of something in the glass. It was a figure, standing behind me. My heart raced as I turned around, but there was no one there. Just the empty hallway stretching behind me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe I was just tired, I thought. Maybe I needed some fresh air. I stepped outside onto the balcony, taking a deep breath to calm my nerves. The city lights twinkled below, and I tried to focus on the beauty of it all. But my mind kept drifting back to the mirror. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a reflection. It was like it held secrets, things that were better left unexplained. When I went back inside, I found Rachel still standing in front of the mirror, her eyes wide and unblinking. I felt a wave of concern wash over me. I approached her, trying to break the spell that seemed to have taken hold of her. But as I got closer, I saw something in the mirror that made my heart stop. There were shadows moving behind her, figures that twisted and turned in the glass. They looked like people, but they weren't quite right. Their features were blurred, their bodies distorted, as if they were trapped in some kind of limbo. I felt a surge of panic. I wanted to shake Rachel, to pull her away from the mirror, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I was frozen, staring at the reflections that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I could feel the energy in the room shift, growing heavier and more oppressive. It was like the air had thickened, making it hard to breathe. Finally, I found my voice and called out to Rachel, but it felt like my words were swallowed by the mirror itself. I took a step forward, determined to confront whatever was happening. I stood beside her, forcing myself to look into the glass. What I saw made my blood run cold. My own reflection smiled back at me, but I wasn't smiling. I felt my heart race as I realized that the reflection was not just mimicking me, it was mocking me. The smile on my face was wide and unnatural, stretching impossibly across my features. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I tried to process what I had just seen. Rachel turned to me, her expression shifting from wonder to concern. I could see the fear in her eyes, and it only made my own fear grow stronger. We were both caught in the grip of something we couldn't understand. The shadows in the mirror seemed to grow more pronounced, swirling and twisting as if they were trying to break free. I could feel the energy pulsing around us, and it was overwhelming. I grabbed Rachel's arm, pulling her away from the mirror, and we stumbled back into the living room. The others were still there, oblivious to the strange happenings in the hallway. We tried to shake it off, but the atmosphere had changed. The laughter felt forced, and the conversations were stilted. I could see Rachel glancing back at the mirror, her curiosity battling with her fear. I wanted to tell her to forget about it, to leave it alone, but I knew that wouldn't work. The mirror had a hold on her, and I could feel it pulling at me too. As the night wore on, we all tried to distract ourselves, but the unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching us, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. I kept glancing at it, half expecting to see something move in the glass. But nothing happened. It was just a mirror, right? Just a piece of furniture. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Eventually, we decided to call it a night. We all retreated to our rooms, but sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of the mirror and the shadows it held. I kept replaying the moment when my reflection smiled back at me, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. What had I seen? What did it mean? The next morning, we woke up to a gloomy sky. The rain was pouring down, and it matched the heaviness I felt in my chest. We all gathered in the kitchen, trying to shake off the unease from the night before. But every time I walked past the hallway, I felt the pull of the mirror. I knew we had to leave, but part of me wanted to confront it one last time. After breakfast, I finally made my way back to the hallway. The mirror loomed in front of me, its surface reflecting the dim light of the apartment. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, feeling the energy crackle in the air. I looked into the glass, determined to face whatever it was that had haunted me. But as I stared into the mirror, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The shadows were back, swirling and twisting in the glass. I could see shapes forming, figures that seemed to reach out toward me. I felt my heart race, and I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like I was trapped, caught in the mirror's grasp. And then, just like that, it all snapped into focus. I saw my reflection again, but this time it was different. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure malice. The reflection stared back at me, its eyes dark and empty. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that whatever was in the mirror was not me. It was something else, something that wanted to take my place. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I tried to process what I had just seen. I turned and ran, bursting into the living room where the others were gathered. I could see the confusion on their faces as I tried to explain what had happened, but the words wouldn't come. All I could feel was the weight of the mirror pressing down on me, its energy wrapping around me like a vice. We quickly gathered our things, the atmosphere heavy with confusion and fear. I could see Rachel glancing back at the hallway, her curiosity battling with the fear that had taken hold of us all. I wanted to scream at her to leave it alone, to forget about it. But I knew that wouldn't work. The mirror had a hold on her, and I could feel it pulling at me too. As we stepped outside, the rain poured down around us, washing away the remnants of the strange weekend. I felt a sense of relief as we left the apartment behind, but the unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had escaped something dark and sinister. In the days that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me. I went back to work, met up with friends, and tried to forget about the mirror. But every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing at reflective surfaces, half expecting to see something lurking in the glass. I realized that some things are better left unexplained, that some mysteries are best left untouched. As for the mirror, I hoped it remained where it was, holding its secrets close and watching over the empty apartment. I knew I wouldn't be returning anytime soon, and part of me was grateful for that. I had gotten my escape, but I also learned that some places are better left undisturbed, especially when they hold the kind of energy that can distort reality itself. It was one of those hot summer days when the sun blazed down and made everything feel a little sticky. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, feeling restless. My best friend Sam was lounging next to me, flipping through some random magazine. Both of us had been stuck in the city for too long, and we were itching for a change. I suddenly had this wild idea. Why not just pack our bags and head to the beach? It sounded like the perfect way to escape the heat and have some fun. I turned to Sam, who was always a bit more cautious than I was, and suggested we find a last-minute rental by the ocean. Sam looked skeptical, raising an eyebrow. She was always worried about what could go wrong. I could see her mind racing with all the things that could happen if we booked something without checking it out first. But I was feeling adventurous and convinced her to go along with my plan. I jumped onto my laptop and started searching for beach rentals. After scrolling through a bunch of listings, I finally found one that looked amazing. It had a huge deck with a stunning view of the ocean, and the price was surprisingly low. I couldn't believe my luck. I showed the listing to Sam, who still looked a bit unsure but eventually agreed to go for it. With a few clicks, I booked the place. I felt a rush of excitement. We packed our bags quickly, throwing in swimsuits, snacks, and sunscreen. The drive to the beach was filled with laughter and music, and I felt like we were on the verge of an epic adventure. When we finally arrived at the rental, I was pumped. The house looked just like the pictures, with a big wraparound deck and a view that made my heart skip a beat. But as we walked up to the front door, I noticed something strange. There was no sign of the host. No car in the driveway, no one waiting to greet us. It felt a little eerie, but I brushed it off. Maybe they were just busy. I turned the doorknob, and to my surprise, it opened easily. The inside was just as nice as I expected, with high ceilings and a spacious living area. But as soon as we stepped inside, I noticed a weird smell in the air. It was musty, like something had been left to rot. I glanced at Sam, who looked a bit uneasy. We wandered around the house, checking out the different rooms. The first bedroom was beautiful, with a king-sized bed and a fancy bathroom. The second room was a guest room, equally nice but empty. I felt a little thrill of excitement, but Sam's nervous energy was starting to rub off on me. The third bedroom was smaller, and that's when I saw it, a door in the corner, slightly ajar. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it open. Inside was a small, dark room with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were lined with framed photographs. I stepped closer to get a better look. The photos were of people, families, couples, and friends, posing in various rooms of the house. But every single face had been scratched out. It was creepy and unsettling, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Sam was right behind me, and I could feel her tension. She tugged at my arm, urging me to leave. I was torn between wanting to explore and the growing sense of dread creeping in. I finally stepped back, the unsettling feeling growing stronger. The sun was starting to set outside, and the house felt darker, more ominous. Strange noises echoed through the halls, a creaking floorboard, a faint rustle. I glanced at Sam, who looked like she was about to jump out of her skin. We decided to head back to the living room, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air was thick, and the musty smell lingered, making me feel uneasy. As night fell, the house transformed. Shadows danced on the walls, and the noises grew louder. A flicker of light caught my eye, and I turned to see the lights in the living room flickering. My heart raced. I felt like we were in some kind of horror movie. I suggested we go outside to the deck for some fresh air, hoping it would calm our nerves. But as we stepped out, the wind picked up, and the ocean roared below. The view was beautiful, but it felt like the calm before a storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. We stood there for a while, trying to shake off the weird vibes. But then we heard a loud bang from inside the house. It sounded like something had fallen over. Sam's eyes widened, and I could see the panic rising in her. We rushed back inside, and that's when we noticed the lights flickering more violently. I felt a surge of fear. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to admit that I was scared. I tried to play it cool, but I could see Sam was ready to bolt. Just then, the power went out completely, plunging us into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but it only made the shadows seem more ominous. I could hear Sam breathing heavily beside me, and I felt my own heart racing. We decided to check the front door, thinking maybe we could just leave, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. I felt trapped. The house was silent except for the sound of our breathing and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned my flashlight toward the staircase, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a figure standing at the top of the stairs, just beyond the reach of the light. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel its gaze on us. Sam grabbed my arm tightly, her grip like a vice. I felt frozen, unable to move. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. It felt like an eternity before I finally found my voice. I turned and bolted for the back door, Sam right behind me. We burst outside into the cool night air, our hearts pounding. I didn't stop running until we reached the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. Finally, it clicked open, and we jumped inside, slamming the door shut. I turned the key in the ignition, praying the car would start. The engine roared to life, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I slammed the car into gear and sped out of the driveway, tires screeching on the pavement. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house. It loomed in the darkness, silent and foreboding. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and I knew we had narrowly escaped something truly terrifying. The drive back to the city was a blur. I focused on the road ahead, trying to shake off the fear that clung to me. Sam sat quietly beside me, her eyes wide and her face pale. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. The adrenaline was still pumping through both of us, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. When we finally reached the city, I pulled into a gas station. We sat in the car for a while, just trying to breathe and process everything. The world outside felt normal, but we knew we had just experienced something strange and unsettling. I looked over at Sam, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. I could tell she was replaying the events in her mind, just like I was. We had both learned a valuable lesson that night. Sometimes, things that seem too good to be true really are. As we drove home, I reflected on the whole experience. I had always been the adventurous one, the one who wanted to take risks and try new things. But now, I realized that there was a fine line between adventure and danger. From that day on, I promised myself I would be more cautious about last-minute decisions. I would take the time to read reviews, check ratings, and make sure I knew what I was getting into. When I finally got home, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted but relieved to be in a safe place. I closed my eyes, trying to shake off the memories of the creepy house and the strange photographs. I knew I would never forget that night, but I also knew I had learned an important lesson. The next time I felt the urge for a spontaneous getaway, I would think twice. I would choose a place with good reviews, a friendly host, and maybe even a little more light. Because sometimes, it's better to play it safe than to risk getting caught up in something you can't escape from. In the end, I realized that adventure is great, but safety is even better. I would always cherish the memories of my travels, but I would also remember the importance of trusting my instincts. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt grateful for the lesson learned and the safety of my own home. I had always been the kind of person who embraced spontaneity. So, when spring rolled around and I found myself with a few free days, I jumped at the chance to take a little trip. The world was waking up from winter, and I was ready to dive into adventure. I grabbed my friend Jake, who, to be honest, was a bit of a worrywart but also the perfect balance to my free-spirited nature. We were headed to a city I had never been to before, and I was excited to explore. I found this apartment listing online that looked absolutely stunning. The photos were bright and airy, with cozy furniture and a view of the city skyline. It seemed like the perfect place to kick back after a day of sightseeing. I clicked through the pictures, imagining us sipping coffee on the balcony, soaking in the sun. I booked it without a second thought, thinking it would be a great way to make some memories. As we drove into the city, the excitement bubbled inside me. The trees were starting to bloom, and the streets were buzzing with life. Jake, on the other hand, was glued to his phone, checking reviews and trying to dig up anything he could about the place we were headed to. I rolled my eyes, but let him have his moment. I was ready to enjoy our little getaway. When we finally arrived at the apartment, my heart sank a little. The building was older than I expected, and the entrance looked a bit shabby. Still, I brushed it off. It was just the outside, right? I was sure the inside would be just as beautiful as it looked in the pictures. I opened the door and stepped inside, only to be met with a wave of disappointment. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't fresh. It felt like something was off. The living room was cluttered with unpacked boxes, and the furniture was not as pristine as it had appeared in the photos. The couch had a few stains, and the coffee table was covered in a layer of dust. I glanced at Jake, who was already frowning. I could see the skepticism in his eyes, and I felt a twinge of unease creeping in. I tried to shake it off. After all, we were here to have fun, and I wasn't going to let a little mess ruin my mood. I convinced Jake to help me tidy up a bit. We moved some boxes to the side and wiped down the surfaces. As we worked, I kept telling myself that it would be fine. We would make the best of it. It was just a place to sleep, after all. Once we finished cleaning, we decided to explore the apartment a bit more. The bedrooms were small but cozy, and I claimed one for myself. Jake took the other room, and we both agreed that we could make it work. As we unpacked, I noticed a closet in my room. It was slightly ajar, and curiosity got the better of me. I opened it fully, expecting to find extra blankets or maybe some storage space. Instead, I found a jumble of odd items crammed inside. There were old clothes, a few dusty books, and a strange collection of trinkets that looked like they belonged to someone else entirely. I picked up a small, chipped ceramic figure and examined it closely. It felt heavy in my hand, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it had a story behind it. I set it back down, feeling a chill run down my spine. Jake poked his head into the room, and I told him about the stuff I found. He looked skeptical, as usual, and suggested we just leave it alone. But I couldn't help myself. I was intrigued. I rummaged through the closet a bit more, hoping to find something interesting. That's when I stumbled upon a small, leather-bound diary wedged in the back corner. I pulled it out, brushing off the dust. The cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age. I felt a thrill of excitement. It was like finding a treasure. I opened it up and began to read. The handwriting was shaky, and the entries were filled with ramblings about strange noises and feelings of being watched. My heart raced as I read about the previous guest's experience in this very apartment. The entries detailed how the guest had felt increasingly uneasy during their stay. They wrote about hearing whispers in the night and the feeling of being locked in, even when the door was wide open. As I read on, I could feel the atmosphere in the room shift. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and I glanced at Jake, who was now standing in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. I kept reading, my hands shaking slightly. The last entry was particularly chilling. It described a night when the guest had tried to leave but felt an invisible force holding them back. They wrote about being terrified and feeling trapped. I closed the diary, the weight of what I had just read settling heavily in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but the unease that had been creeping in since we arrived was now impossible to ignore. I showed the diary to Jake, and his eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. He didn't say anything, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. We both stood there in silence, the atmosphere thick with tension. I felt a mix of fear and fascination. I wanted to dismiss it all as nonsense, but something deep down told me that there was more to the story. After a few moments, we decided to leave the room and try to shake off the eerie feeling. We ventured out to explore the neighborhood, hoping that some fresh air would clear our heads. The city was vibrant, with people bustling about, and I tried to focus on the sights and sounds around me. But as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like the apartment had cast a shadow over our trip. We spent the day wandering through parks and checking out local cafes, but I could feel the weight of the diary in my bag, a constant reminder of what we had uncovered. Jake was quieter than usual, and I could tell he was just as unsettled as I was. We returned to the apartment as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rooms. As we settled in for the night, I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, looking for fun things to do the next day. But the eerie atmosphere of the apartment kept creeping back in. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I glanced at Jake, who was sitting on the couch, staring off into space. I could tell he was lost in thought, and I felt a pang of worry. We decided to turn in early, hoping that a good night's sleep would help us shake off the unease. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up tight. As I lay there, I couldn't help but replay the entries from the diary in my mind. I tried to convince myself that it was just the ramblings of an overactive imagination, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of fear pressing down on me. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by a loud noise coming from the living room. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to listen. It sounded like something had fallen, or maybe someone had knocked something over. I glanced at Jake, who was still sound asleep, oblivious to the commotion. I felt a surge of panic and a strong urge to get out of the apartment. I quietly slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened it slowly, peering into the dimly lit living room. Everything looked normal, but the feeling of dread hung in the air like a thick fog. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, feeling a chill run down my spine. As I stood there, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The closet door in the living room was slightly ajar, and I felt an overwhelming urge to investigate. I approached it cautiously, my heart racing. I reached for the handle and pulled it open, revealing the same jumble of items I had seen earlier. But this time, something felt different. I scanned the contents, and that's when I saw it. A small, tattered piece of paper was sticking out from under a pile of clothes. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. It was another note, hastily written and filled with frantic scrawls. It spoke of a presence in the apartment, something that watched and waited. My stomach dropped as I read the words, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't stay here any longer. I turned and rushed back to my room, shaking Jake awake. I could barely form the words, but I managed to tell him that we needed to leave. He looked confused at first, but as I explained what I had found, I could see the realization dawn on him. He quickly got up, and we both scrambled to pack our things. In the chaos, I felt a sense of urgency pushing us forward. We needed to get out of that apartment, away from whatever dark energy lingered there. As we rushed out the door, I glanced back one last time, a shiver running down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. We hurried down the stairs and out into the cool night air. The city felt alive around us, the sounds of laughter and music filling the streets. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the apartment lift off my shoulders. We found a nearby hotel and checked in, grateful for a fresh start. As we settled into our new room, I couldn't help but reflect on the experience. I had always been one to embrace spontaneity, but this trip had taught me a valuable lesson. There was a fine line between adventure and recklessness, and sometimes it was better to trust your instincts. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I realized that I had made the right choice to leave. In the days that followed, Jake and I explored the city with a renewed sense of purpose. We laughed, took photos, and made memories that would last a lifetime. The apartment was just a blip on our radar, a reminder to be cautious and to trust our gut feelings. I was grateful for the adventure, but even more so for the lesson learned. Sometimes, the best stories come from the unexpected twists and turns, and I was ready for whatever came next. My name is Lily, and I've always had a thing for thrill-seeking adventures. I love ghost stories, urban legends, and anything that sends a shiver down my spine. As late fall rolled around, with Halloween just around the corner, I felt that familiar thrill bubbling inside me. It was the perfect time of year for a spooky adventure, and I was on the hunt for something that would get my heart racing. One day, while scrolling through some local forums, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The picture showed a crumbling structure with peeling paint and broken windows that seemed to stare back at me. Weeds and wild grass had taken over the yard, and a rusty fence surrounded the property, barely standing. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The air around it was thick with the scent of decay and something else I couldn't quite place, maybe just the smell of old wood and mold. Whatever it was, it sent a chill down my spine, but that only made me want to explore even more. Of course, I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone to share in the adventure, even if they weren't as enthusiastic as I was. That's where my best friend Tom came in. He was always skeptical about my wild ideas, but I knew I could convince him to join me. I could tell he wasn't thrilled when I told him about my plan to spend a weekend in the haunted house, but he reluctantly agreed to come along. I think he just wanted to make sure I didn't get myself into too much trouble. As we drove to the house, I could feel the excitement bubbling inside me. The closer we got, the more I imagined what we might find. Tom, on the other hand, was quiet, probably trying to convince himself that this was a bad idea. I could see him glancing at the house as we parked, his expression a mix of skepticism and concern. I didn't care. I was ready for whatever awaited us. We got out of the car and stood in front of the house, taking it all in. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the wind like it was inviting us in. I pushed it open, and it groaned in protest. The inside was just as I expected, dusty, dark, and filled with the smell of mildew. The floorboards creaked beneath our feet, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was it, the adventure I had been waiting for. As we stepped inside, I flipped on my flashlight, illuminating the cobwebs that hung like curtains in the corners. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling away in places to reveal the bare wood beneath. I could almost hear the whispers of the past echoing through the halls. Tom followed closely behind, his footsteps hesitant, as if he was afraid the floor might give way beneath him. We wandered through the house, exploring each room. The living room was filled with old furniture, covered in sheets that looked like ghosts themselves. I could almost picture a family sitting there, laughing and enjoying their time together. But that was just my imagination running wild. Tom, on the other hand, kept pointing out how everything was just old and forgotten, like the house had been left to rot. As we made our way upstairs, the air grew colder. I could feel it wrapping around me, sending chills through my body. Tom shivered too, and I could see him glancing at the windows, as if expecting something to jump out at us. I loved it. Every creak of the house, every shadow that danced in the corners, only fueled my excitement. We reached the top of the stairs and found ourselves in a narrow hallway lined with doors. Each one looked just as old and decrepit as the last. I opened the first door, revealing a dusty bedroom filled with broken furniture and a bed that looked like it hadn't been slept in for years. The air was heavy with dust, and I could barely see through the thick layer that coated everything. I was about to turn away when I noticed something strange, a cold spot right in the middle of the room. It felt like someone was standing there, breathing down my neck. I quickly backed out, my heart racing. Tom looked at me, a mix of concern and disbelief on his face. I shrugged it off, trying to shake the feeling. We moved on to the next room, and as I opened the door, the lights flickered. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was getting good. Tom, however, looked like he wanted to bolt. We continued exploring, and strange occurrences began to happen more frequently. The lights flickered in and out, and we felt cold spots in almost every room. I could see Tom's skepticism starting to waver. He was still trying to rationalize everything, but I could tell he was getting uneasy. I loved it. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating. After what felt like hours of wandering through the house, we stumbled upon a door at the end of the hallway that we hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar, and a strange light flickered from within. My heart raced as I pushed the door open, revealing a hidden room that looked like it had been untouched for years. The walls were lined with old photographs, yellowed with age, and dusty furniture sat in the corners, covered in sheets. As we stepped inside, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The photographs caught my attention. They depicted a family, smiling faces frozen in time. But as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The last few photos showed the family growing increasingly gaunt and hollow-eyed, their smiles fading into expressions of fear. Tom stood beside me, his face pale as he examined the pictures. I could see the realization dawning on him. This wasn't just an abandoned house, it was a place where something terrible had happened. The family had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. The thrill I had felt earlier was replaced with a heavy dread. What had happened to them? Why had they disappeared? The questions swirled in my mind, and I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on us. It was as if the walls were closing in, trapping us in the past. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house, making us both jump. I turned to Tom, and we exchanged a glance filled with panic. The atmosphere had shifted. It felt charged with something dark and foreboding. We needed to leave. The excitement had turned into fear, and I could feel it creeping up my spine. We bolted from the hidden room, racing down the hallway and back to the stairs. The cold air wrapped around us like a blanket, and the lights flickered violently as we descended. I could hear Tom's heavy breathing behind me, and I knew he was just as scared as I was. We reached the front door, and I fumbled with the handle, my hands shaking. It felt like an eternity before I finally managed to push it open. As we stepped outside, the fresh air hit us like a wave, washing away the heaviness of the house. We stumbled onto the lawn, gasping for breath. I looked back at the old structure, its broken windows and peeling paint standing ominously against the darkening sky. The house loomed behind us, a silent witness to the secrets it held. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. I jumped in, still trembling from the adrenaline. Tom followed, slamming the door behind him. We sat there for a moment, catching our breath, the weight of what we had just experienced settling in. I could see the fear in Tom's eyes, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Some adventures come with unexpected dangers. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house one last time. It stood there, shrouded in shadows, a haunting reminder of the family that had once lived there. The thrill I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a sense of unease. I had come looking for a ghost story, but what I found was something far more unsettling. I learned that sometimes, the thrill of adventure can lead you down dark paths, and not every mystery is meant to be uncovered. The house would remain a ghost story in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unknown. I realized that some places are better left alone, and some adventures are not worth the risk. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching us, waiting for the next curious soul to wander into its grasp. I arrived in the city just as winter settled in, the air crisp and biting. The holiday lights twinkled in every direction, casting a warm glow against the cold backdrop. I was here for a work trip, and I had booked a cozy little apartment through Airbnb. It looked perfect in the pictures, modern, bright, and located in a vibrant neighborhood. I was excited to explore the area after my meetings, but I had no idea what was waiting for me. The first impression of the apartment was great. It had a spacious living room with big windows that let in the sunlight, even in the dead of winter. The kitchen was sleek, and the bedroom felt inviting. Everything seemed to be in order, and I thought I was in for a pleasant stay. But then, there was the host. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with a quirky smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He greeted me with an enthusiasm that felt a bit too much, but I brushed it off. After all, he was just being friendly, right? He showed me around the place, pointing out the amenities and the quirky art pieces he had scattered around. I nodded along, trying to absorb everything while also feeling a little uneasy. At first, it was just small things. He would pop in unexpectedly, asking if I needed anything or if I had settled in okay. I thought it was nice of him to check in, but it quickly became apparent that he was more involved than I had anticipated. He would bring me strange gifts, like a jar of homemade jam one day and a weirdly shaped ceramic frog the next. I didn't want to be rude, so I accepted them with a forced smile, but inside, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. As the days went by, his visits became more frequent. I would be sitting on the couch, trying to unwind after a long day, and suddenly, he would appear at the door, his smile wide and his eyes gleaming with excitement. He would talk about the neighborhood, sharing odd little facts that felt rehearsed. I could sense that he was trying to engage me, but instead, it felt suffocating. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in a little more each time he entered. I started to feel trapped. I had come to this city to focus on work and enjoy some downtime, but instead, I was constantly on edge. I would hear his footsteps in the hallway, and my heart would race. I tried to keep myself busy, working late and avoiding the apartment when I could, but he always seemed to find me. I felt like a prisoner in my own temporary home. One night, after a particularly long day, I returned to the apartment, exhausted. I just wanted to collapse on the couch and forget about the world for a while. But as soon as I stepped inside, I noticed something was off. The air felt heavy, and I had the strange sensation that I was being watched. I shook it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I noticed it, the way the curtains were drawn just a little too tightly, the way the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally in the corners of the room. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I decided to investigate. I started looking around the apartment, checking behind furniture and peeking in closets. That's when I found it, a small, black camera tucked away in a corner, barely visible but unmistakable. My heart dropped. I felt sick. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like a punch to the gut. I quickly searched the rest of the apartment, and to my horror, I found more cameras hidden in various places. Panic set in. I was being watched. The host's strange behavior suddenly made sense. The gifts, the unannounced visits, the invasive questions about my life, it was all part of some twisted game. I felt the wave of nausea wash over me as I realized how naive I had been. I had ignored all the warning signs, thinking I was just being overly sensitive. But now, it was clear that I was in a situation that was far from safe. I needed to get out. I grabbed my things in a frenzy, shoving clothes and personal items into my bag without a second thought. I couldn't stay here another minute. As I rushed to the door, I heard the familiar sound of his footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced as I fumbled with the lock, praying I could get out before he showed up. Just as I managed to open the door, he appeared, his smile wide and unsettling. I felt a chill run down my spine as I pushed past him, not bothering to say anything. I sprinted down the stairs, my mind racing with thoughts of how I had let this happen. I made my way to the street, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Once I was outside, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I quickly pulled out my phone and reported the incident to Airbnb, detailing everything that had happened. I knew I had to warn others about this strange host. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something much worse. As I walked away from the apartment, I reflected on the experience. I had learned a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts. I had ignored the signs, thinking I was being overly cautious, but now I knew better. Safety should always come first, no matter how friendly someone appears. The city felt different now. The holiday lights that had once seemed so inviting now felt like a facade, hiding the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. I found a hotel nearby, checked in, and settled into a new room that felt safe and secure. I took a moment to breathe, letting the tension of the past few days melt away. In the days that followed, I focused on my work and explored the city, but I couldn't shake the unease that lingered. I was grateful to be out of that apartment, but I couldn't help but think about what could have happened if I hadn't discovered the cameras. I made a promise to myself to always be vigilant and to never ignore my gut feelings again. The holiday season continued around me, filled with laughter and joy, but I carried a newfound wariness. I enjoyed the festive atmosphere, but I was more cautious than ever. I learned to appreciate the little things, like the warmth of a friendly smile from a stranger or the comfort of a safe space. I spent my days wandering through the city, soaking in the sights and sounds. The streets were bustling with people, and the aroma of roasted chestnuts filled the air. I visited local cafes, indulging in hot chocolate and pastries, all while keeping an eye out for anything that felt off. The city was alive, but I felt like an outsider, always looking over my shoulder. One evening, I decided to visit a nearby park that was known for its beautiful holiday decorations. The trees were adorned with lights, and families gathered around to take pictures. I tried to immerse myself in the festive spirit, but the memories of the apartment and the strange host lingered in the back of my mind. I watched as children laughed and played, their joy a stark contrast to the anxiety I felt. As I strolled through the park, I couldn't help but notice the people around me. I observed their interactions, their laughter, and their warmth. It was a reminder that not everyone was like my host. Most people were genuinely kind and caring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to be cautious. I made a mental note to always trust my instincts, no matter how silly it might seem. The days turned into a blur of work meetings and city exploration. I visited museums, enjoyed local cuisine, and even attended a holiday concert. Each experience was a reminder of the beauty in the world, but I still felt a shadow hanging over me. I was grateful for the distractions, but I knew I had to confront the fear that had taken root in me. As my trip came to an end, I found myself packing my bags, ready to head home. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I was glad to leave the city behind, but I knew that the experience had changed me. I had learned to be more aware of my surroundings, to listen to my gut feelings, and to prioritize my safety above all else. On the flight home, I reflected on everything that had happened. The strange host had turned my holiday trip into a lesson in vigilance, and while I would never wish to go through that again, I was grateful for the growth that came from it. I realized that I had gained a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. As I settled into my seat on the plane, I took a deep breath, letting go of the tension I had carried with me. I was ready to return to my life, armed with new insights and a commitment to trust my instincts. The holiday lights of the city faded into the distance, but the lessons I learned would stay with me forever. When I finally arrived home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was back in my familiar space, surrounded by the comforts of home. I took a moment to appreciate the safety and security of my surroundings. I knew that I would always remember that strange host and the unsettling experience, but I also knew that I had emerged stronger and wiser. In the weeks that followed, I found myself sharing my story with friends and family. I wanted to raise awareness about the importance of safety, especially when traveling. I encouraged others to trust their instincts and to be vigilant, no matter how friendly someone may seem. My experience had taught me that it's better to be cautious than to ignore red flags. The holiday season continued, and I embraced the festivities with a newfound appreciation. I decorated my home, baked cookies, and spent time with loved ones. I was grateful for the warmth and love that surrounded me, a stark contrast to the unease I had felt just weeks earlier. As the new year approached, I made a resolution to prioritize my safety and well-being in every aspect of my life. I wanted to travel more, but I also wanted to be smarter about it. I researched safety tips, read reviews more carefully, and made sure to communicate my plans with friends and family. I was determined to reclaim my sense of adventure while staying aware of my surroundings. Looking back, I realized that the strange host had inadvertently taught me an invaluable lesson. I learned that it's important to listen to my instincts and to prioritize my safety above all else. I had come to appreciate the beauty of the world while also recognizing the need for caution. As I closed the chapter on that unsettling experience, I felt a sense of closure. I was ready to embrace new adventures, armed with the knowledge that I could navigate the world safely. The city that had once felt so inviting now held a special place in my heart, a reminder of the lessons learned and the strength gained. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my ability to trust myself. I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I had the power to protect myself. The strange host had become a distant memory, a reminder of the importance of vigilance in an unpredictable world. And so, as I stepped into the new year, I carried with me the lessons of the past, ready to embrace the future with open arms. I knew that life was full of surprises, both good and bad, but I was determined to face them all with courage and awareness. The world was waiting, and I was ready to explore it, one step at a time. It was a crisp winter evening when I found myself wandering the bustling streets of the city, my mind lost in a whirlwind of thoughts. I had come to this vibrant metropolis for a much-needed getaway, a chance to escape the monotony of my daily routine and immerse myself in a new environment. As I strolled past the twinkling holiday lights and the lively crowds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. I had booked a cozy apartment through Airbnb, eager to experience the city like a local. The moment I stepped into the space, I was struck by its charm and warmth. The host, a friendly older woman named Margaret, greeted me with a genuine smile and a wealth of recommendations for exploring the neighborhood. She made me feel right at home, and I couldn't wait to dive into the city's vibrant culture. Over the next few days, I found myself lost in the city's wonders. I wandered through bustling markets, savoring the aromas of spices and the laughter of the vendors. I visited museums that showcased the city's rich history and diverse art scene. Each experience was a revelation, opening my eyes to new perspectives and broadening my horizons. I even stumbled upon a small gallery featuring local artists, where I spent hours admiring the creativity and passion that filled the space. One evening, as I was returning to my apartment, I noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench in a nearby park, his weathered face etched with a pensive expression. Something about him caught my eye, and I found myself drawn to him. Without thinking, I approached him and struck up a conversation, my curiosity getting the better of me. To my surprise, the man welcomed my approach with open arms. He introduced himself as Liam, a retired professor who had lived in the city for decades. As we talked, I learned about his fascinating life story, his travels, his passions, and the lessons he had learned along the way. I was captivated by his wisdom and his ability to find joy in the simple things, like watching the leaves fall or listening to the laughter of children playing nearby. Liam spoke of his love for literature, sharing stories about the authors who had influenced him and the books that had shaped his worldview. He told me about his favorite spots in the city, places that held memories of his youth and moments of inspiration. The way he described them made me want to explore every nook and cranny of the city, to uncover its hidden gems. As our conversation deepened, Liam shared with me his philosophy on life. He spoke of the importance of connecting with strangers, of learning from each encounter. He believed that every person we meet has a story to tell, a lesson to impart, and that these interactions can enrich our lives in ways we often overlook. His words resonated with me, reminding me of the beauty that can arise from unexpected interactions. Over the next few days, Liam and I became unlikely friends. We would meet at the same bench, sharing stories and insights over a cup of coffee from a nearby cafe. I looked forward to our conversations, each one filled with laughter, wisdom, and the warmth of genuine connection. He became a mentor of sorts, imparting his knowledge and experiences with a warmth and generosity that I had rarely encountered. Through my interactions with Liam, I gained a newfound appreciation for the city and its people. I saw the world through a different lens, one that valued connection, empathy, and the power of unexpected encounters. The city, once a mere backdrop for my travels, became a living, breathing entity, filled with stories waiting to be discovered. One afternoon, Liam invited me to join him at a local book club he had been attending for years. I hesitated at first, unsure of what to expect, but he assured me it would be a delightful experience. I agreed, and that evening, I found myself surrounded by a diverse group of people, all passionate about literature and eager to share their thoughts. The discussion was lively, filled with insights and differing opinions. I was amazed by the depth of knowledge and the variety of perspectives in the room. It was a refreshing reminder of how literature could bring people together, transcending age, background, and experience. I felt a sense of belonging as I contributed my thoughts, encouraged by Liam's supportive nods and smiles. As my time in the city drew to a close, I found myself reluctant to leave. I had grown attached to the place, to the people, and especially to Liam. We exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch, but I knew that our chance meeting had left an indelible mark on my life. In the weeks and months that followed, I found myself reflecting on my time in the city and the lessons I had learned. I realized that the true magic of travel lies not in the places we visit, but in the connections we make and the perspectives we gain. Liam's words echoed in my mind, reminding me to always keep an open heart and mind, to embrace the unexpected, and to find joy in the simple moments that life offers. As I settled back into my routine at home, I made a conscious effort to carry the spirit of my encounter with Liam into my everyday life. I began to seek out opportunities to connect with others, whether it was striking up conversations with strangers at coffee shops or volunteering in my community. I discovered that everyone had a story worth hearing, and I felt enriched by the connections I formed. I also started a small book club of my own, inspired by the one I had attended with Liam. I invited friends and acquaintances to join, and soon, we were gathering regularly to discuss our latest reads. The discussions were lively, filled with laughter and thoughtful insights, and I found joy in facilitating these connections among my friends. As the seasons changed and the holidays approached, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I decided to return to the city for a visit, eager to reconnect with Liam and explore the places we had talked about. I reached out to him, and to my delight, he was thrilled to hear from me. We made plans to meet at our favorite bench in the park, a spot that had become a symbol of our friendship. When I arrived, I spotted Liam sitting there, his familiar smile lighting up his face. We embraced like old friends, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the bond we had formed. We spent the day wandering the city, revisiting the bookshop, the cafe, and the park where we had first met. Each place held memories of our conversations and the lessons we had shared. As we walked, Liam shared stories about the changes he had seen in the city over the years. He spoke of new developments, but also of the importance of preserving the character and spirit of the neighborhoods. I listened intently, appreciating his insights and the way he honored the past while embracing the future. That evening, we returned to the book club, and I introduced Liam to my friends. It felt like a full-circle moment, and I was grateful to share the wisdom of my mentor with those who had become part of my life. The discussions flowed seamlessly, and I could see the spark of connection igniting among everyone present. As the night came to an end, I realized how much I had grown since my first encounter with Liam. I had learned to embrace the unexpected, to seek out connections, and to find joy in the simple act of sharing stories. The city had transformed from a mere destination into a tapestry of experiences, woven together by the people I had met along the way. When it was time to say goodbye, I felt a bittersweet pang in my heart. I knew that our time together was precious, but I also understood that our connection would endure, no matter the distance. We promised to keep in touch, and I left the city with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart full of gratitude. In the months that followed, I continued to nurture the friendships I had formed, both in my hometown and in the city I had come to love. I made it a point to travel more, to seek out new experiences, and to connect with people wherever I went. Each journey became an opportunity to learn and grow, to embrace the unexpected, and to cherish the beauty of human connection. As I reflected on my adventures, I realized that the unexpected encounter with Liam had changed the course of my life. It had opened my eyes to the richness of the world around me and had taught me the importance of being present in each moment. I carried his lessons with me, a guiding light as I navigated the ever-changing landscape of life. And so, as I planned my next adventure, I knew that I would approach it with an open heart and an eager spirit. The world was full of stories waiting to be discovered, and I was ready to embrace them all, one unexpected encounter at a time.